Yes, and we're live. Good evening, everyone. It's Photography Live and Uncut, Thursday evening, a little bit earlier than usual. Work commitments again. How about that? My guest today is James Maher, and we'll explain why. James, welcome to my show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem at all, James. This is great because I've only got to know you over the last couple of weeks because of the Arcanum involvement that we're both involved with. We'll talk about that later. But just to quickly explain why the show's going out earlier, James very kindly is in between workshops. He's done a workshop this morning with a couple of guys in New York, and then he's off this afternoon to do some more workshop with
On the
some
coldest
guys.
day of the year. So,
On the
yeah,
coldest day of the year, he's saying in New York as well. You're mad. You are mad.
it toughens you up. It's what makes us tough New Yorkers. If they,
Change the workshop to some studio work this afternoon or something
yeah,
of that nature.
yeah.
Anyway, James, thank you so much for joining me, and again on such short notice. Really, let's start it off. I know you're in New York, but whereabouts in New York? Let's get a geographical slot where you are.
So I live in the East Village neighborhood, so Fourth and First. It's that's where my grandparents and mother grew up. I grew up on the Upper West, but I've lived here for the last 10 years.
Lovely.
So East Village is the kind of artist. Well, it used to be the artist center of. Now it's the trendiest place in New York. So
Nice one.
yeah, it's kind of crazy here.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Right, so you're in a trendy part of New York. That's lovely. That's the best way to start things off. So tell me, James, how did photography get started for you? Where did this great adventure which you're on now? Where did it all start and how?
It's kind of an interesting story. I was a math major and computer science major in Wisconsin in the freezing cold winters, and I had what I called a quarter life crisis. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I actually got into photography through Photoshop because I started to I was making fake IDs for all my friends and using Photoshop to to do all that. And then through that I said, wow, Photoshop's fun. Let me get a camera. And so I got a camera, and so I I kind of went backwards that way.
Right. Okay.
It was like a little bit after 2000. And so then I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And the last 2 summers, when I would come back from Wisconsin to New York, I got a job assisting for a commercial photographer. I didn't really know anything. This guy was pretty big, and I just said, I'll sweep the floors, I'll make strong coffee. If you ever work for as an assistant for a professional photographer, making strong coffee is a really good skill to have.
Right.
And so then after that, I really enjoyed it. So I graduated, and I worked for him for a year and a half or so, and then did night and weekend classes at the International Center for Photography. And then I've had my own business for about 10 years.
That's fantastic. So literally from university, as you say, you've started backwards there. You got yourself into Photoshop, decided to buy yourself a camera, but on your holidays just went straight to a commercial photographer and said, I want to work for you.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Was I found a connection. I had never been into photography when I was younger. It was an active decision of trying to figure out what's something that I like technical, I like people, I like what could I and so I came on photography. I said, let me try that, and that's why I went and met the photographer.
That's amazing. So let's get into what you really enjoy doing most at the moment, street photography. Did it start off with street photography, or were you just like the majority of photographers when they get started, just doing everything and anything?
No, it definitely started off with street photography. I mean, when you're in New York and you buy a camera for the first time, I've always liked people. I've always kind of like a social introvert, sort of. But the first thing I started photographing, just without even knowing anything, was people, interesting people, and also architecture around the city. It's like in New York, you photograph kind of everything. But a huge half, at least, of what I photographed were, I'd go to Fifth Avenue, I'd go to different streets, and I would just capture interesting people. So I didn't even know street photography was a thing. I think that's how most people start with it anyway, and then you start to learn about it more as you go along.
That's interesting you say that, because I was talking to Levi Shand. I don't really know him at all. He lives out in Madrid. He started doing street photography and didn't know he was doing street photography until someone showed him an article and said, that's the type of work you're doing, isn't it? And he realized, he said, there's a name for it. I can now develop, and on he went from there. And he's doing workshops in Madrid, which is fantastic. In the meantime, he's teaching English. But it's interesting how people get started and they don't realize that there is a genre called street photography that I suppose really to a degree it would have been muddled with the journalistic type attitude to photography or documentary type photography that people probably get confused with.
Yeah, it's
Well, it is that in actual fact, isn't it? Let's be honest. Street photography is documentary work.
yeah. You suddenly wake up and realize how many people have been doing it for a
Exactly
long
right.
time. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you're kind of just doing it, and it's different from what you've seen, and then suddenly.
Yeah. It is quite amazing. You just look through the bookstores and how many photographers from days gone by that were doing what we love doing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your cameras first of all. What was the first camera you bought then?
I don't even. The first camera I bought was one of those small Canon ones.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
I forget even what it was. Just one of the tiny. You know, I think it's the same progression that a lot of photographers go, and they get. You know, you have a budget and you get one of the, you know, few $100 ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off with that, and I actually just started before I even went back to the city. I was more in Wisconsin. It's so cold that you don't want to go outside.
Yep.
So I would more like take photographs and just play around in Photoshop and see. But then the first I started off with digital. So the first digital camera I purchased was the 10D.
Okay.
So that was about a year after I first got my first camera was the 10D.
Did you buy a load of lenses at the same time, or did you just keep to one or two, or just one?
It's a great question. I had two. I had two zoom lenses. I started off a longer one and a shorter one.
Yeah.
And then I got into primes a little bit, not too much later, like a 50 millimeter.
Yeah.
And then as I went along, you know, my favorite lenses these days are 28 or 35.
Yeah. Seem to be the favorite lenses for street photographers these days. Which, in actual fact, is what the lenses that I know there's a 1.5 crop comes into it and all that jazz with regards to the present digital cameras, but the 28 and the 35 were the sort of the cameras which you know, the old timers were using, from what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to start getting a little bit more into 50 millimeter soon.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of 35 for the last as many years as I can count, and so I want to switch it up, or I need to switch up something.
Yeah, I think we should just clarify here for that what you've just said there. When you're saying now you want to get into 50 mil, is that a legitimate 50 mil with a full frame camera? It is.
Yes, all the numbers I was giving full frame.
Yeah, full frame.
You know, on the Fuji X100, yeah, it's got the equivalent of 35. So yeah, it's 28, 35 have been my favorites for a long time, and I think I want to start doing a little bit more with 50.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. Let's talk about settings. When you first started off, your first camera, obviously that sounds to me like it was probably as a compact to start off with. Your 10D. Yeah. How did you go about your street photography with your settings on your camera?
I just turned it on and pressed go.
Program shooter.
I don't remember. Yeah, I'm sure I looked into some things. You know, when I got the year after when I got the 10D, right about that time was when I started taking classes.
Yeah.
So I knew enough about how to have a fast enough shutter speed to freeze motion. Although my teacher gave me a number that I think it was a little slow, that I used a little faster than. So I used to put it on. You know, I used to go back. I've always went back and forth between shutter priority and aperture priority.
Yeah.
I just because of street photography, I've done manual, but you know, every angle that you can possibly look at it is different light. So if you're on manual and constantly changing it, I think it's a little bit too slow. So these days I shoot in the city a lot more on shutter priority.
Okay.
I really, especially doing street photography, architecture is a little bit different. I do aperture more often, but for street photography, I really pick the minimum to get the people and the scene sharp, and then I go from there and I tweak from there.
It's really interesting, this. I love asking this question about settings because I was talking to Marie Lagneau, who basically uses aperture priority with a Leica. I spoke to Thomas Letard from Switzerland. He uses the program mode. I speak to Levi Shand. He's basically between aperture and program. Personally, myself, I go automatic on the ISO, and then I select the shutter speed according to the action I want, whether I want it stopped or whether I want it blurred. I generally keep the aperture around about 2.8. That's that sort of range 3.5. It's really, really interesting how people adapt the cameras, and the cameras are so smart these days to the way they want to work. And I think in actual fact you're probably the first one who said majority of the time I'm using shutter priority for street work. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why. I mean, when I teach, 85 to 90% of people that I come across shoot an aperture. It's just what everyone does. You know, it's whichever setting you use, if you know it well enough, you can get the exact same results. It's like if you shoot an aperture and you know what you're doing, you get the exact same results. I'd like to have actually the maximum aperture smallest aperture, so the most depth of field possible. Yep. I like to have everything sharp. I like to zone focus. So what I'm actually really doing by keeping the camera on shutter priority is I'm setting the camera in the perfect settings to get the maximum aperture that I can. So it's as sharp as possible. So I put the I put the ISO up as high as I can as needed, and I mix those with the shutter speed to freeze the motion, and then I'm just trying to pull out as much aperture as possible. That's kind of I sort of actually feel like I'm controlling the aperture, even though I'm focusing on what the aperture is going to give me while I'm changing the other two settings.
Yeah, I'm with you. And by the sound of things, then the majority of your shooting is going to be around about 5.6, f8, f11.
But even if middle of a summer day in the middle of the sun, I like going at f16.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
so you're really going for depth of field. You're not looking to.
No, definitely. I'm not. And it's all. Some shots are different. Some shots I feel differently. At night, dusk, I'm shooting with low aperture. But during the day, I do a lot of things where I try to create relationships, and I try to create. If you look at my street work, it's a lot of it's busy. I have ADD, so I like busy things. I like things with a lot of elements going on and bringing things together. And so just the way that I shoot, I like to have more depth of field, so I like to have multiple things sharp.
Yeah, it's a good segue, as you guys say, because we can go to a screen share now. And as we were saying just before we started the show, I was part of the Arcanum, well, I am still in the Arcanum, sorry, but I was part of the cohort with Valerie Jardin, and you've just taken over from Valerie. We'll talk about that later. But as I said to you before, looking at your website, I get the impression your street photography is a totally different style and approach to street photography than Valerie's. But as I'm going to go to screen share now for the viewers, because I want to explain. James has got such a detailed website here. We couldn't possibly show it all in the relatively short time that we've got with James here today. So I've chosen a particular page which is is all about water towers. I love the New York water towers. They're fantastic when I saw them for the first time when I went to New York, which was many years ago. Are you seeing that as a full screen, James?
Yeah, I do.
You are.
Yeah.
That's great, because sometimes it goes into a little bit of a tunnel vision. So we start off with the first image here, and I think this is where you've been talking about. I think that's the biggest I can get this image. So for those that are watching, apologies, it's not bigger. And I think that this is where we're coming now. Where we're talking about depth of field. We can literally see from front to back here. Everything is in sharp focus. Could you just? I'm going to flick through the images. If you could just give us a brief resume as regards to. I know they're titled here, Tribeca, New York City.
This one's a famous. It's the Silk Exchange building. It was a former Silk Exchange. It's one of my favorite buildings in the city. So yeah, I mean, just to tell you a little bit about, street photography is kind of the cog between everything that I do. But then I do a lot of urban landscape photography. So I sell a big part, about a third of my business is selling prints, and I work with art buyers, interior designers, companies. So I built up over the years. I built up this huge archive of all different types of images, depending. I'll do it on my own, or sometimes I'll get requests for certain things, and I'll go out and shoot more of that. So I sometimes I'll get requests from an art buyer saying, I need a bunch of images of New York in different seasons or different, and so I have in my Lightroom categories and all that stuff, and so I really try to capture all different aspects of the city, both in terms of the landscape and then the real street life stuff is complementary.
Yeah, I'm just showing the viewers here all these different topics here, from fine art prints, and then you got your blog, and then your portrait and photo services. So that's
I do a lot of community portraiture and portraiture. That's a big part of the business. That's a third. Yeah.
More water towers here. I love. Is there a lot of cross processing going on here? That one, I'm assuming there must have been some type of analog type work on filtering.
These two images are actually the same image with just different processing. I try to keep my street photography not processed that much. I try to keep it as natural as possible. Landscape stuff, I do different things. I do, actually, if you look at these two images, in my kitchen, I have a whole wall of water towers, all colorized into different colors with different lacquered frames in the same color. So it's
A little bit sort of like Andy Warhol type style.
Yeah, it's a cool.
Yeah.
It's I like creating different walls with things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's if you're gonna shoot fire escapes, the
I was
hot
going to
stuff
say.
in shadows is the best way to best.
Yeah, exactly. It's so synonymous with New York, with what we see over here with it,
Yeah,
with the programs and that fire escapes on the outside of the buildings.
definitely.
The arches there, and
Yeah.
let's go on
I
to
mean,
the next page.
yeah. If you actually go back to the previous page, I'll show you one of my favorite images. Is
Yeah,
actually
sure. Tell me which one.
the one with the green on the bottom left.
This one?
Yeah. So that's it's just this is actually turned into this is now a year later or a couple of years later it's a huge building. It's a huge development. It's kind of this weedy street in Gowanus. And there's only a few minute period actually where this shot worked because the sun was peeking out from the building and only lighting up the front weeds but not the back ones, and so it kind of this image didn't work 2 minutes before and a few minutes after. It didn't work at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Timing is everything, isn't it? And then
Yeah, lighting, timing, yeah.
I've been involved in quite a heavy conversation about innate talent, and I still maintain it's timing. It's another story.
Yeah.
Let's go to another page quickly. What's the best one I can go to?
I'd probably say some of the best ones would either be to go to like the street photography page or the blog. Probably
Shall we go to top prints on street photography?
Do that, yeah.
Let's click on that one. See what comes up.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is the sort of work which we've been seeing quite a lot in our cohort. Street observations.
Yeah.
Facial expression, fashion, that sort of thing.
And this folder is for ones that are more sellable because I'm selling them over the website. So it's more of a kind of a top hits of the most sellable stuff. But within that there's other archive.
That's interesting you say that. Hold on to that thought with regards to selling prints, because I've had quite a few emails with regards to privacy and publishing rights of photography. That's just typical New York, isn't it?
Yes. I'll tell you actually a funny story about that is I love the bike messengers. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the city. And I've never this is 2000. I've been shooting for about 10 years or so, and I had never gotten a shot that I really liked with Steam, and I had never gotten a shot that I really liked with a bike messenger. And then suddenly I got them both in the same shot, and so I feel like I never have to take another shot of a bike messenger with Steam again.
Works so well. Beauty, like it. I saw this one when I was going through before, and I just love the eye contact you got there with that newspaper seller or the kiosk seller, and it's cigarette just dangling out of his mouth. Beautiful capture. Well done. Well done. This must be Central Park, I'm assuming. Yeah,
that's Central Park. A couple, playing around.
Is that what it's like now? Is there snow on the ground out there now?
No, it's pretty gross. Yeah, it's not. That's right after it's freshly snowed, or that was actually during a storm.
Again, this is the type of work which we've seen quite a bit of in the cohort. Just an observation of an arm or something like that with.
I like to think of this kind of like a landscape of kind of a confident woman. She's dressing herself in the same way that she looks.
Exactly right. Yeah. Nice juxtaposition there, like that. And then I finished on the New York cabs with the discount mufflers.
If you go to if you go to the bottom right one, just the bottom right image, the very So this is a busy scene. A ton of stuff going on. I do different types, but this is something that I often do, and so this is a reason why I try to keep a large depth of field, because I'm often trying to capture images that are kind of chaotic and multiple things. So that explains exactly what when you're talking about the large depth of field. That's because you've got everything there. I can see that. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Let's we'll come out of the screen share, because you touched on something there which we had I had an email via my website with regards to privacy and publishing problems, laws, whatever. Now you just said there that you're taking street photos, images of people in the street, and you're able to sell them. Do you have any privacy problems? No, it's I mean, different countries are different. France, I think it's illegal. You know, you wouldn't want to do this at all in the Middle East. I think, you know,
No,
I don't
no.
know exactly, but America, you definitely can do this. It's you know, it's an important type of photography, and I think it's art. You
Yep.
know, it's in the U.S. There's no right there's to privacy in public. When you're out in public, you know, you're being filmed in New York. There are
Yeah.
cameras everywhere. You're being photographed.
Yeah.
But you think about these images. It's a lot of people ask, like, don't you feel? There's some people ask, don't you feel a little creepy sometimes and things
Uh-huh.
like that. But I like to think about it as, you know, I like the people that I'm photographing. I'm not trying to like, you know,
You're not
get
looking to ridicule them, are you?
no. I mean,
No.
I'm not trying. I mean, it's I'm just trying to capture life and capture ideas.
Yeah.
It's you know, if there's an image that might look badly upon someone, I mean, it's not, you know, and it's a beautiful image. I may still take it. You know, it's
Yeah.
not. I'm not trying to ridicule someone. I'm trying to capture what's in front of me. But if you look at images from the past and you know all the way 30s, 40s, 50s, the most interesting images are of the people and the culture, and
Exactly
they're the
right.
ones that we really look towards. So I'm trying to
Mm.
keep that kind of history and going with this.
No, I think you're right. And I think, in actual fact, just to clarify on this privacy side of things, I think the problem comes when you are approached by an agency that wants to use your print for their work, and then they'll say, "Well, have you got a signature of approval, so to speak?" I don't know the exact term, but and you say no, they can't use it. But
Yeah, for,
you're quite in your rights to publish it, Flickr, Google, a book or a print. But of
yeah.
course, as soon as it goes to a viral situation like a commercial interest, then of course it's a different case, isn't it?
Yeah, as art, you can definitely any artistic purpose, even to advertise an art show, you can do that. But you can't do
Yeah.
any commercial, and you also can't use it as like, you know, I couldn't take an image of someone on the street and then write an article for a newspaper about like a herpes cream and then
No,
put that
exactly
image
right.
with it. You know, that's kind of slander. So
Yeah,
you can't,
exactly.
you know, you can't do anything like that. But any
Yeah.
artistic purposes.
Yeah, that's a good coverage of that topic there. Thanks, James, because as I say, I've received quite a few emails about street photography. The email, in actual fact, came from a guy in Sydney, Australia. And my son has just got back from Budapest, and Budapest, Hungary, no street photography. You
Okay,
cannot,
that's
no,
yeah.
it's a big no-no. Can't do it. I think you, in
Yeah,
actual fact, have to ask permission to take a photograph of an individual. And of
yeah.
course, that just kills it, then, doesn't it? You don't get the candid imagery of what you're trying to achieve. You're getting a post shot.
Definitely.
So,
Sometimes I'll actually when I really don't want to make someone uncomfortable, I'll take an image and then I'll ask them for a portrait.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's good.
yeah. And then, of course, we've got all the other tricks, and with the hip shot, or the pretending we're taking a photograph of the building, and then checking the
Oh,
screen and
definitely. Yeah.
taking the shot. All those little tricks that come out, which is great. Apparently, Valerie's very good at pretending she's on the iPhone and she's taking photographs. I'd love to see her doing that. I must. I think we'll ask her to put it on a video for us, because
Or
apparently,
yeah, or pretending you're on a phone. I've done that. Yeah, I just like
yeah,
to.
exactly. I must try that myself, actually.
Yeah,
Let's try it.
I shoot just to see. I shoot a lot. I have the Fuji here. I shoot a
Yeah.
lot. When I do shoot from the hip, uh, I don't like kind of come too low. I'll like hold the camera up here, and I'll
Yes,
go
I'm
back.
with you.
I'll shoot from the eye, but then I'll also just kind of hold the camera like this.
Yeah.
And I'm so in focus, so I know the distance. So you're seeing the whole thing. It's like hip shooting, but you actually know what you're gonna get, and
Yeah.
it looks like you're thinking. So it's a really easy way to actually see the scene and hip shoot at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point you mentioned there. Let's talk a little bit more about your equipment, because you've that's a Fuji X100. Is that the S or the T?
That's the S.
That's
Yeah.
the S. That's for the camera that I've got. And you also use a Canon now.
Yeah.
Which one is that you're now using?
I've been using the Mark II for about the last 4+ years.
Okay.
So you know, maybe upgrade it at some point, but that thing is hung around and it's a beast, so I have no need for anything
Yeah,
more.
I must be honest. The amount of people that I've heard talking about that camera, I don't understand why people are upgrading it. It always seems to be get good reviews, or still going good and strong. So
I'll tell you, I blow those images up huge,
yeah,
but from that camera, but it's even the more megapixels you get than that, it's dealing with all those files and stuff. It's perfect. That's like kind of the perfect camera, from the right amount of megapixels, the right thing
yeah,
for the professional stuff that I do.
Yeah, I think this is one thing that people do forget. You know, it's okay buying, you're getting a 16 and you're, may I say, 20 odd megapixels. That's okay. But when you start pushing the 24, 35, 36 and bigger, you've got to have a computer that can handle these files that are coming out. You know, so it's because they are incredible sizes. I'd hate to think what the 40 and the 50 megapixel camera is going to produce in terms of file size.
Yeah, those are for people who take not too many photos, but really, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, they're probably taking 5 a day or something.
Definitely.
How do you feel about using the Canon 5 as the 5D Mark II around the street? You're comfortable with that?
I am, because I started with it. I really, I had to. There wasn't this great quality small camera back then. So I've done it with both a zoom lens and primes. I do when I shoot a little bit slower than with that. I mean, I shoot slower than most people. As in, I'll pick places. Like I'll instead of actually like walking around too much and photographing, I'll kind of like spend 5 minutes here, walk a couple of blocks, spend 5 minutes there, and let everything happen around me. And even more so with a big DSLR, because it's a heavy camera. You're slower with it, and if you're walking and to try to get that in the right position and to take a good technical shot, I'd rather pick a location and let everything come to me and be ready with it. And that's kind of the way I adapted with the camera.
Let's get a picture of yourself going out to do some street photography. Do you decide which camera you're going to take at the time, or do you take both out?
No, I for street photography these days, it's the Fuji.
You take the Fuji.
Yeah, I take the Fuji. For when I'm doing architecture, landscape stuff, then it's the SLR. And then within that, if I'm having to shoot a neighborhood or shooting a specific thing, then I'll also shoot a little street photography within that, or I'll pop my 28mm prime in my bag and flip it out.
And do you use a tripod with the SLR when you're out?
I mean, I use tripod for night photography. Yeah, I'm not or dusk or anything like that. The daylight is good enough for me for day. Yeah.
You're not a Trey Ratcliffe then walking around with. I don't know whether you read the reports about him in London just recently, but.
I haven't. No. Yeah. I honestly, I'll for my personal thing, I don't necessarily. I'm one of those that don't believe in tripods during the day.
Yeah.
I think limit yourself. I think it's. I mean, you can shoot at f11 or more during the day with the light, so it depends.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And the ISO is pretty good. Well, the ISO on the 100S is amazing.
Amazing.
When I'm out at night shooting using 6400 ISO, no problem at all, and it's got a very nice grain to the images, film-like almost. I don't know too much about the Canon because I was a Nikon shooter before I sold all my Nikon gear and bought into the Fuji, but. By all accounts, the 5D Mark II is just as good on the ISO.
Yeah, it's pretty equal. Whereas the only difference is I'll actually at night sometimes shoot on ISO 6400 on the Fuji X100, whereas Canon 32 is the maximum for me.
32 is the maximum, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Now, just quickly talking about Trey, as you know, he came over into London. He did a massive walkabout on Valentine's Day. Around about 250 people were following him around. Caused mayhem by the sound of things. Got kicked out of a couple of pubs.
Wow.
And then he went and did, just trying to fly his quadcopter down by the Lord Mayor's office down by Tower Bridge. Got into some security problems down there. So I think he flew off to San Francisco with his tail between his legs. He said, I think I'll leave the quad at home next time. Bless him.
I think I said this to you previously, but if anyone had the ability to start a spontaneous riot, it's probably Trey Ratcliffe.
Exactly right, yeah. All in good nature, of course.
Oh, of course, yes, good nature. Yeah.
Who's that crowd following that man? Feel like a disciple walking along with a tribe behind him. Let's talk about your workshops, James, because this, right in the middle of 2 workshops, is a very important part of your life now. Can you tell again what? Okay, let's take a scenario. I'm going to sign up for one of your workshops. What can I expect to get from you from your workshop? Because I'm going to miss you now from the cohort. I've moved on to a different level, but.
So I'll tell you. I've been doing the workshops for about 3 years now. I didn't really, I put up a page just as an idea on the site, and then over time people started doing it, and then I started developing it more, and I do about maybe 3 a week on average.
Right.
Busy seasons can be 4, 5, 8. Then February is about 1 or 2 because it's so freaking cold there. So what I prefer to do for my favorite ones, I have a couple routes that I really like. So I have more of like an iconic New York uh, route, and then I have more of like a street photography, really interesting sites. That's my favorite one. That second one.
Mhm.
And they're either 3 or 5 hours. Those are the standard ones that I do, and I have like the walk through each neighborhood and try different things. But it's interesting because it's actually taught me a lot. I've had to teach all different types of people, every age group,
Mm.
every skill set, every type of camera, every way of shooting. Some people even come with like iPhones.
Yeah.
It's so it's basically I have the things that I really try to get people to do and are my favorite things to do. But I have to adapt to what they want to see and what they want to do. And I also what I try to do is mix the workshops into as much teaching, how to, I want them
Yeah.
to like get better technically, get better with their concepts and figure out what they want to photograph. I want to inspire them. But then also, I think a big part, I'm really into New York history and city history and current events and all that type of stuff and what's happening. So I try to mix the photography and the sightseeing with stories about the past and stories about the future of where the city's going and why maybe I'm trying to take a certain shot of something because of what it means.
Yeah.
So I try to, it's a kind of a full package of that, and they're all one-on-one or small traveling groups up to 4 people, which I've done the bigger workshops, and I like them because you have multiple days, but one-on-one for that amount of time, you can really do a lot with someone.
Yeah, and that's a nice little touch you're doing there because it sounds as though you're bringing in sort of like almost like a tour guide of New York. If they're choosing a district, they can actually give you can obviously give them a lot more detailed information with regards to that, as you say, the history of the area and build up, and at the same time give them a few more tips on improving their photography.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Um, does the customer decide where he wants to go, or does he say, "I'm in your hands, James. Where we going?"
Some do. Yeah, some tell me they
Right.
want to see things. I try as much as possible to um, I don't I don't give in so easily because some people
Mm.
say they have their ideas of what they want to photograph.
Sure.
And they'll show me I can't tell you how many times I've seen that image of the New York skyline with the pier posts in the front,
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
and people send me and they're like, I want to take that image. Um, and so if they really want to, I'll take them to that. But I try to give all my things and say like if you're gonna spend this money and spend this much time with me, I could tell you on your own exactly where to go to take that image.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
with this amount of time, I can really show you some amazing things that you wouldn't even know you want to see. So that's I try to when I'm emailing back and forth to people, I send
Yeah.
them all the routes and I try to most people are like, oh wow, that sounds perfect, exactly, I didn't even know I
Yeah.
wanted to do that. But some people I'll take to exactly where they want to
So
go.
it's to a degree, then you're probably, as we would say, taking people off the beaten track, so to speak, and just sort of getting a little bit of a slant on an area, which, okay, for if you take London, Oxford Street is the obvious place to go, but if you go around the back streets of Oxford Street, you've really got some really
Mhm.
ideal places to go for street photography. This is obviously something which you try to introduce.
Definitely, yeah. And
Yeah.
there are within everything there are some iconic locations and some
Yeah.
amazing places to see the city. Those are all integrated into everything, but
Yeah.
it's a big mixture of everything.
Yeah. I've been to New York twice, and it was back in the 80s. Um, when I was up Windows of the World when the Twin Towers were up, and that was quite an amazing scene to look down on a plane flying below me. I
Mhm.
was I was a bit freaked out on that one, but I didn't get a chance to walk around. And quite honest with you, I wasn't that into photography at that time. But it was a business trip, so it was a case of hotel, office, bar, hotel, office, bar, that sort of thing. Then I flew up to Toronto and really got cold.
That's
But so yeah, I'd love to go back to New York, but we'll work something out, I'm sure, at another time.
from the '80s. It's a lot cleaned up.
I'm going to say it's changed a hell of a lot, a hell
It's
of a lot. I know
yeah.
from not only from what I hear, but from what I've read as well, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Arcanum now, James. This must be pretty exciting for you. You've joined the Arcanum. You've taken over a street cohort because Valerie's work commitments, and you're neatly, ideally suited to stop into. What's your thoughts on it? First off, I know there's been a lot of work you've been doing because I've been keeping tabs on you with regards to the messages and how you're changing things around. But what's your thoughts on the Arcanum?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm at the very beginning of it. It took a lot of training to kind of get everything that I needed to do to get to this point. I was really excited for it because, I was telling you about my workshops, and people come into my life for 3 or 5 hours. Some will come
Yeah.
back multiple times or email me things, but this allows me to kind of complement that with a really long-term teaching, because there's only, within 3 or 5 hours, I'm trying to get people out the door with the basics of technical stuff and concepts, and I
Mm.
want them to know the concepts too. But with having 6 months with a person or something like that, you really get to help them figure out what they want to shoot and see where they're most comfortable shooting, and then help them guide themselves to the right content.
Yeah.
So that's the part I think I'm really most excited for, is to really spend a lot of time with people,
Yeah.
um, and kind of create this energetic community where everyone's teaching themselves, and everyone's kind of growing together.
I think that's a very important point you make there, actually, because as I said, when the Arcanum, I was very fortunate to be one of the first to be invited by Valerie last when was it, like March, April time. Um, and the first thing that struck me within the first 2 weeks, I've said this before, so apologies to viewers for sounding a bit boring, but I learnt more about street photography in the first 2 weeks of being part of the Arcanum and the street photography cohort than I did in 5 years of being a member of a camera club. Because the yes, the cohort has you, the master, to be guided, but the most important part involved from your fellow apprentices is, and they spot things that you just don't see. It could be a branch sticking out of someone's head, which you've looked at the image for so long and you just don't see it.
Definitely.
And those are such invaluable points and comments made. Simple comment that you'll probably get from some guys: yeah, this is a great shot, but you've got better in your set. And from that you just start to build and build and build, and this is such a unique thing which the Arcanum offers people who want to learn about photography, not only just street photography but all the other genres which are covered. um, it's a great concept. I'm now moved on to Sphere 2. I'm in the lounge, so to speak, at the moment, waiting to see what happens next. So time will tell on that to see what happens. But great concept, superb linkage, and the websites and the grand library. Well, it's just amazing what you can actually watch there. So yeah, I think you're going to have a great time. You've got some great guys as well in the Arcanum in the cohort at the moment that are
Yeah.
coming up through, and their work is good. There's no doubt about it. So I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a couple of guys there that are really, really good in my opinion.
Yeah.
That you're going to enjoy it. You're going to have a good time.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It's
Yeah.
I was not necessarily surprised, but I was, with the level of sophistication people were talking about everything. It was
Yeah.
made me very happy to come into something like this already.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Did you know Valerie before the Arcanum?
Yeah, we've become friends through. We both started off writing for digital photography school.
Yeah.
So we've both been doing that for I don't even know how many years, for a while, and then
Wow.
through that we've always been emailing back and forth and talking about things, and then we started doing workshops together.
Oh, lovely.
We've done a couple of years. We've done some New York workshops where we do with 2-day
Right.
thing with about maybe 12 people,
Yeah.
and so that's been a really fun thing to do.
She's coming to New York soon, isn't she? When the weather warms up, I think she's doing LA in a couple of weeks' time with the Baronex, I think, and then come to New York, isn't she?
She's coming. We're doing New York in the fall.
In the fall, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought it was early. I thought it was sort of springtime. I know she's going to LA with Baronex in a couple of weeks' time, so that'll be a fantastic time.
Yeah, we're gonna do
the
you know
guys
it's
out
gonna be
there.
right around the photo expo time.
Yeah. Okay.
Do both. Yeah.
Okay, we come to that point of the show where I gave you the option whether you wanted to talk about my 5 named photographers and one-word association, but you chose the other option of telling me about your favourite photographers and people that you get inspiration from. So over to you. Who's your favourite photographer or photographers too, maybe?
Yeah, I have a couple. I'll tell you about one guy who's still doing it strong, is Matt Weber.
I've heard about this
him.
guy.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He's got some crazy life stories. He started out as a taxi driver in the 70s and 80s and saw so much crazy stuff that he said, I had to get a camera, and that was his entrance into street photography. And so his stuff is amazing. I would check his stuff out. I personally I love two things about street. I love to see other New York street photographers because it inspires me to what to shoot, and I like to see, it's like I try to do, I love Bruce Davidson as well, doing the subways during the kind of gritty 70s and 80s, and then it makes me think of what I'm doing when I'm on the subways. It's the complete opposite, but it's on purpose. Some people would go to the subways and try to take gritty images. But that's not necessarily the case of what New York is anymore. You're not taking people in these like beautiful outfits and clean and pristine. It's still dirty. The subway tracks are still dirty, but the people are much more pristine. So it's interesting to compare your work in that way. Bruce Davidson, Matt Weber. The first photographer that I really loved was Gary Winogrand.
Yeah.
So I got into him. I loved, and Lee Friedlander.
Yeah.
And Lee Friedlander I love because you can look at his images from New York or the middle America, or even his like more recent landscape stuff, and it all like has the same feel. Like his landscape stuff feels like this kind of energetic, crazy, same as his street scenes. So you can kind of get a sense of him in that. So I like all those people. And then I also love like photographers like William Eggleston, who it's complete opposite. So that's just for looking at a different part of the world that I'm not in.
Yeah, that's out there somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah. So many people say like, oh, I wish I was in New York, like, photographing. There's so much going on. And I'm thinking like, I wish I was in some small town in Mississippi taking kind of the, other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. I find with William Eggleston in particular, one you mentioned there, is the fact that and this comes to this conversation I've been having with people about this myth of talent, innate talent. He takes a photograph and you think to yourself, there's not a lot of people that have taken that photograph. He's seen something. The infamous one, obviously, is the little tricycle, which comes to mind every time I think of William Eggleston. So, who has been your person that has inspired you the most? This doesn't necessarily have to be a photographer, mind, I would hasten to add.
That's a great question. It depends on what part of my life you would say. I'll tell you, when I was younger, it was sports figures. I was a big basketball player, and I just loved to go out and play sports. And then so that always taught me about this. You're talking about the myth of talent. It was I always enjoyed the practice. I always enjoyed going out by myself and kind of clearing my head and just shooting over and over and over again. And it's same thing with photography. When I try to inspire people, or when all you have to do to get good at being a photographer, you just have to go out with a camera. It can be an iPhone, it can be anything. You just have to keep thinking about it every day. It would be sports. My wife's a big inspiration just because she's one of the hardest workers I know, and kind of not compromising, anything like that. So these days it's her, definitely.
So the up-to-date version is hers, but previously, the younger life, it was probably a Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or something of that.
Yeah, well, I was a Knicks fan, so definitely not.
Oh, you're a Knicks fan, so it wasn't those two.
John Starks,
I don't know any Knicks players. I was trying to think of it. I know a few Chicago Bull players, but not in the Knicks.
Yeah, it's not that you should. Yeah, they were good, but yeah, no.
I know it's not something that it's like the football clubs in this country. If you're an Arsenal supporter, you don't know anyone who plays for Tottenham. They're right next door to one another. It's one of those things, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's almost tribal.
I saw it last year. I saw a Tottenham game.
Yeah.
One of the best experiences I've just the crowd and the fans. It was amazing.
It's something, I think it's unique to football actually, and certainly in Europe. And I've noticed some of the football that we're watching from your side of the pond now, the Major League Soccer, that I can hear them starting to do some cheering and chanting in the background. I'm thinking, yeah, you got a little bit longer to catch up with that, guys.
A couple hundred years we'll be caught up a little. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. James, it's been great talking to you, and we've managed to slot just a really good, detailed chat between your two workshops today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, pleasure's mine.
And I wish you all the best with the Arcanum. I'll be obviously dropping in from time to time just to see what's going on, and we'll keep in touch that way.
Definitely.
And obviously, if ever you're in London, just don't hesitate to give me a call, and we'll have a meet up, have a coffee or something. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So, yeah, exactly. I'd love to do that. My son keeps saying he wants to go to New York, so I might just jump on, get in his bag somewhere and get out there. That'd be great.
Yeah, not a hard flight.
Yeah, that's super. So anyway, yeah, it's the end of the show, everyone. And as you know, I always sign off. You are going out shooting tomorrow or maybe over the weekend. Yeah, leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you. Thank you. Thanks for watching.
Right.
Bye bye.